Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Joining us today, Nicki Jhabvala, Washington Post. And Nicki, just another day of practice. They get a day off. Fans will be out there. It'll be fun to see the juice for that on Sunday. Then pads on Monday. But today seemed like another kind of ramp-up practice. We did see the first interception of camp, Michael Davis, on Jayden Daniels. I'm curious what you've kind of made of the defense's performance these first 3 days. I know everyone's looking at that through the lens of Jayden, but of all the turnovers and the talk of DQ and Joe Witt Jr., what have we seen from this defense in the first 3 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think they look solid. I think every day needs to be taken into context, right? And this is something that Dan Quinn mentioned quite a bit is, not every day is the same. The drills they're running aren't the same. The number of installs they put in aren't the same. I mean, they're really on day 3 because they reinstall, the things they learned in the spring. So this is really just day 3. It was, Andrew Wiley said it was their first run period. So they're really just getting started, and the focus for these 3 days has been primarily in the red zone. So, it's not just, you can't just compare them apples to apples, but, I think they look solid. You're not seeing, the tons of picks, but we saw that last year and the secondary ended up sucking. So I don't know that that's, like the true measure. I just really like the way they look in practice, and that sounds so elementary, but it's more of, you watch them on the field and everybody's moving. There's urgency. There's competitiveness. Guys seem like they want to play and like they know what they're doing out there. And that is just such a massive leap from last season. So, well, that's not, their end goal to stop there. Obviously, it is a drastic improvement. So yeah, I think they look good, but it's still so early to really judge any player or position or positional group or anything like that. So, yeah, they're just really getting started.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. But to your point, you can't get to the next step if you don't have the first one of knowing what you're doing. So the fact that they've already passed that test is an improvement. Then again, the bar is so low from last year. Like, who knows what that gets you? The other thing that I've noticed defensively is the communication is just outrageously different. Where do you think that stems from? Is that something that's player-driven, a guy like Wagner coming in? Is that Joe Witt, Dan Quinn, some combination of all those things?
A combination. I really put a lot on the coaching staff. And I think much of it is, and you've heard players say this, and you've heard them say it last season, where they felt like they were getting different messages. From head coach down to assistants and positional coaches. The further down you went, you would get different messages, be it in-game or in general things. Many times this year, players have stressed that the messaging has all been the same. So they've been on the same page, which is key. So clearly the communication from the staff to the players is working. And then you bring in guys like Bobby Wagner, guys like Jeremy Chin, guys like Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz, and, who have done this with now multiple teams and really know how it should go. And I've done a good job of setting the tone. I feel like the Commanders didn't have that voice really at all last year. I mean, Sam Howell being a 5th-round rookie quarterback, really. I mean, it was his second year, but it was more like a rookie. He didn't have sort of that cloud, I guess, to really speak up. It was really Terry. And then on the defensive side, I don't feel like they had that voice, and that was a large part of the problem, especially on the secondary. So, yeah, I think that communication is paramount. I mean, you can't, like you said, some of the foundational blocks, that's huge right there.
For Terry and John, as Nicki Jhabvala is our guest, of course, Washington Post, NFL and Commanders beat reporter, doing a great job at the Post. For Terry and John, I think they're in such an interesting spot because they're still probably more than anyone else the faces of the franchise. Daniels, of course, entering that group by nature of being the number 2 pick and a quarterback. But those two are the longtime vets. They've been around, and they've just been around a lot of bad ball. And I feel like they are both still expected to be leaders. They're two of the first guys at the podium, which is always, tells us a little bit of something, even if it's how the politics of the place work. But they're also, I think, both learning a lot. What have your conversations been like about them and to whatever extent you've got a chance to talk to them, with them through the spring and in these first couple of days of camp?
Yeah, they seem really refreshed mentally. Like, Terry, especially with the quarterbacks he's played with, he just, every year it's at least a couple guys, it feels like, that he's got to get used to, that he's got to transition to. And it's a lot. It can wear on you as a player. And John as well. He's been here longer, right? Yeah, he's been here longer.
Yeah, he has.
And, just the turnover at every level is just, it takes a toll. But it does feel like with this regime, and I know we've said this in the past in all seasons where you feel like there's change and it really is going over well with players. It all comes down to whether they win, of course, on whether this feeling sticks. But it does feel like they have more confidence going into this off season just because of the wholesale changes of the franchise. It's not just the owner, which is a massive piece. It's the front office, it's the personnel staff, it's the coaching staff, it's everything, and the entire practice structure. I think that was a real sticking point with players last year. It was just such a point of frustration because, it's been well documented at this point. And just, how they felt like they went into the season and they were just unnecessarily exhausted and, at risk for injury. So they really like the structure. I think one of the really interesting things that veteran players like Terry and John have brought up, and Dan has mentioned, is, sort of this emphasis on rest periods, which is a total 180 from last year. As you mentioned, they have a full rest day tomorrow after 3 days of camp. Usually, I think most teams go a full week before they get the full rest day. And they have rest periods during the days. So they'll have a recovery period in between, practice, meetings, walkthrough. They'll have time to just unwind. And Quinn thinks that's important, and players agree. So, it's a whole new era.
Yeah, for sure. Science would agree as well. But, what do the scientists know? So one of the interesting things that I have noticed from a structural thing in practice, and obviously I'm sure noticed it as well, I'm just curious what you make of it, is like the general football skills training that they're doing. And they had that one period on Thursday where they're just, it's like a station work. And it's like, hey, we're going to scoop here. We're going to do some catching here. And it's literally everybody on the team, but the quarterback's a specialist. And I think the O-line wasn't in that period. But when you hear coaches talk about, like, we want to preach the fundamentals, to see a coach and Quinn and the staff do it like that, I'm curious, one, as someone who's covered other teams and has great relationships around the league, like, have you heard or seen something like this before? And then also, what do you generally make of that, like, general football skills emphasis on top of just running plays all the time in practice?
Yeah, I've seen other staff do it. But mostly in my experience anyway, there's certainly been people who have covered the league longer and been with more teams. But mostly from my experience, it's coaches just say they're going to do it, but don't really do it. And then, just believe, well, you're at the professional level. You either know how to do this or you don't. Some of it is circumstantial too. Like if they're just, spread too thin, they don't have the time, whatever. But this group, it's been their emphasis from day one, and they've actually held to it. And it's similar to Adam Peters' approach. He said he wants to build through the draft, and he's stuck to it. And that's refreshing to see because there are a lot of times where it's just talk, and you don't really see it play out on the field, and you're like, all right, we're just spinning our wheels here. But there definitely has been an emphasis on teaching. Which I think is vital for the young guys, including, especially really the young guys that came in in recent years, and still don't know some of this stuff. Guys like Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis are really getting some of the teaching that they need, and is only going to help them throughout their career.
This is a loaded question, so I'm just going to apologize, and then I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think that other coaches that say we have covered or that you have covered, they think they're doing a good job with that, or they just think they're supposed to say it and then do what they want anyway? Like, how many of them are just lying on purpose, and how many of them are lying to themselves?
I'm probably some of both. I mean, but I feel like that's sort of the same in the general world anyway. You know, in any profession, there's always a mix of both. But I don't know. I mean, look at Hard Knocks this year with the Giants. There was that one scene at the Combine where Joe Shane is talking to his head of PR of, what he's going to tell reporters publicly, even though it's a flat out lie. And they're kind of joking about it. And I'm like, well, we know it all happens. I'm kind of surprised they decided to blatantly advertise it on Hard Knocks. But yeah, they do it a lot. And sometimes I get it. You can't reveal everything, injuries. All of this is, it's a competitive advantage, whatnot. I think some teams, coaches, whatever, take it to an unnecessary degree where, these aren't state secrets.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always just wonder, though, like, I think that there are some coaches who are like, we're doing a great job, and they just don't know what a great job looks like, despite the fact that they're coaching at the NFL level. But that's a longer conversation for another day. Dose of reality here. I'll try to think of a happier note to end on. But we are, like, the vibes are immaculate right now. Everyone's like, this is great. Everyone's excited. They haven't even put pads on yet, so everyone's still happy. We're like, their messaging matches their substance, and everything is very, very positive. What are the areas that worry you when the rubber meets the road? Because I don't think anyone, all of us have been very positive. It's not like, and they're going to win the Super Bowl. So where are the problem, potential, I'll call it problem areas, the things that are still huge questions for you, despite the fact that they're doing the right things as they get started?
Yeah. I think the uncertainty with the offensive line. What are they going to do at left tackle? And I mean, it's important any year, but especially with a rookie quarterback. So that's a red flag for me. And then I just think, having so many new faces, I don't know that it's necessarily a concern, but it's definitely an unknown. I mean, I don't even know what this offense is going to look like right now. I don't think anybody outside the building knows what it's going to look like. Sure, we know some of the foundational things that Cliff Kingsbury likes to do, what he did in Arizona. We can, deduce from there, but, this is different personnel, different coaching staff, different ideas. So we don't know truly how it's going to look. And that alone is, you just don't know what to expect from this team. I've said this before, and I truly believe it, that this is a group that could be the 2023 Houston Texans and surprise everybody and make that massive leap. Or they could have another 4-13 season. You certainly don't want that. I would think they'd fare much better than that, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen this collection of players together, you don't fully know yet what the system will be. You don't know how they're going to respond to adversity. You don't know how the coaching staff is going to respond to it. So it's a total unknown. In some ways that can help them. But to kind of place expectations, you don't know. And usually when we don't know, I mean, that gives me anxiety and then I freak out and I think there's something wrong. But in this context, I think it's just, a wait and see type deal.
Yeah, the natural skepticism of a true journalist. All right, last thing, I thought of a happier note to end on, because we had two great interviews earlier in the week, and that tends to happen this time of year where you just get great stuff from guys because everyone's in a good mood. They're happy to be back. They haven't beaten up on each other that much yet. What's been your favorite conversation in training camp so far that you can share?
I feel like every conversation with John Ridgeway is fantastic because he's hilarious. I feel like John Ridgeway, if he weren't playing football, and maybe he does pursue this as a, second career when he's done playing, absolutely should be in WWE. I just think he's a character. So I grabbed him after a practice. It was day one because I know like the dude is thin. I'm like, dude, you like lost off your body weight. He's like, yeah, I dropped 20 pounds or whatever. And we were talking about it. He just has these funny one-liners. Like, yeah, I mean, Action Bronson did this. I mean, he's a big dude. He lost a bunch of weight. So I'd like, let me try it. Okay. Sure. But he's like, yeah, no McDonald's, no Five Guys. I really like Italian food. Can't have that. I'm like, oh, man, so what do you do? He's like, just, just chicken or meat and then some vegetables, walk in the truck. But it's the way he delivers just so, like, matter of fact. I'm like, just honest. It was great. Yeah, he was a pretty funny interview. He always is. He's just honest.
That's good to know. We'll add John Ridgeway to our list. I don't think he was on my initial list. We had a great time with Allegretti yesterday because he's apparently a huge sports radio nut.
Fun.
He was great.
He seems really fun. Yeah.
Also, there's got to be an in-depth feature. Maybe you stick 40A on it on his coin collection. We talked about it for like 3-4 minutes, and it was really great. But there is some real in-depth reporting with like coin experts and stuff for a Nick Allegretti feature of this season.
Oh yeah, I heard about his coin collection. I just wanted to do a big feature on him. He seems really entertaining.
He does. He was great. Nicki Jhabvala, everybody. Read her work in the Washington Post. Follow her on Twitter at Nicki Jhabvala for all of the latest from training camp, posting up the videos and the updates and everything on Twitter. Nicki, always appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.